I have my suspicions by MyHatIsBlue.
I think a guy in my class was taken over by a mind eater from space or something. It's a requirement that every religion class in my high school goes on a day-long retreat at least once per semester. You get bussed off to some rotted-out cabin off in the woods, covered in bird shit and God knows what else, where some part-time Bible thumper tells you Jesus loves you, and everyone pretends to do group work made for third graders. I mean, I've got nothing wrong against washable markers, and there's something nostalgic about oversized lined paper, but it doesn't exactly make the dilapidated flooring easier to ignore. So it's a thing where people end up in one of three groups very quickly. The people who sneak off into the woods, the ones who pretend to pay attention till it's over, and the fucking smart ones that just skip the day completely. I'd gotten in shit earlier in the month for ditching one of the classes, so the easy route was out of the question. I was going to have to suffer through the whole day just to keep teachers off my back. So I did what anyone my age would do. Made sure I prepped for this shit. Had a box of Oreos, a fully charged MP3 player, and a phone with up to half of the Game Boy Advance library on it. Of course, I knew people who were going to sneak in vodka, weed, and whatever else they thought they could take in without getting caught. So that box of Oreos had some mileage if at some point I needed to get into the intense world of pothead trading economics. I am smart after all. They just don't give out credit for what I'm an expert of. The point is, I was ready for a lengthy day of pretending to pay attention. And it was all going perfectly. I made it to the first break and I had zero recollection of anything that had been said. Now, this was when everyone got the chance to take a little nature walk and get more connected with God's creation or something. For the people who cared, it was finally a chance to sneak off and make a series of bad choices that couldn't help but feel far too good. Not me, of course. I tend to get paranoid when I get into that kind of partying. Well, that and the fact that I'm not nearly crazy enough to attempt that while out in public. It was pretty clear who was going to end up where, but then there was Steven. Steven was dumb as a post, and at the peak age of 17 was living off half a pack a day. No one really bothered talking to him. He had a bad habit of staring and not use nearly enough deodorant, so you could imagine how the heavy mix of body odor and cigarette smoke turned most people off. He was one of the first to sneak off. Figured the guy needed a chance to light up. Hell, I don't even think he gave anyone a chance to go with him. I only happened to find him by pure luck when I had the bad idea of thinking, hey, maybe those trails aren't as horribly disappointing as everything else around here. Stupid, yeah, but I had to kill time. It took less than 10 minutes for nature to make me its bitch, when I amazingly tripped on a root and dropped my phone. Momentary panic aside, when I picked up my cell, I noticed Steven in the distance. He was just standing with his arms completely straight and his head looking up at something. I, of course, made sure my phone wasn't broken before I went to see what was so interesting. Slowly stumbling my whole way through the forestry, trying my damnedest not to fall on my face again. There he was, just looking up with his mouth open, full out drooling, no movement in his eyes or anything. Steven, man, you alright? No response. I poked him. Got nothing. Took a picture of how stupid he looked, and still he hadn't even moved an inch. Now, I've seen people fucked up beyond belief, but they'd never been able to stand as still as he did. It was unnerving as hell, and I was about to leave before I heard him fall over with a loud thud. I turned to see him just laying on the ground. And then out of absolutely nowhere, he started flailing violently, while gurgling God knows what. Seriously, I thought he was going to break a bone or something the way he was smashing his arms and legs in the dirt. So there's me, by this point, worried he's either about to maul me or die because of some fucking heart attack. So I grabbed the biggest stick I could find before I started dialing 911. And all of a sudden, he just stops. He'd gone from being some goddamn madman on the floor to perfectly calm in under 30 seconds. Steven just laid there, breathing like nothing happened, while I was ready for him to jump at me like a fucking rage zombie or something. The few moments of silence gave me way too much time to debate on logistics of murdering a Steven-sized monster. So I stood there, borderline shitting my pants, and all of a sudden he says,
God, I smell.
I was convinced that somehow in the span of 5 minutes, he'd reached some sort of heavy, drug-induced enlightenment. All while I just looked on with my stick pointed and ready. Eventually, he sat up and looked at me.
Hey, you alright over there?
I still remember that. Am I alright? He had just flipped his absolute shit, and he was asking me if I was alright. What the hell was that all about? Did you have a stroke or something? There wasn't even an answer right away. He was more worried about getting up and brushing himself off. He eventually stretched out and finally answered.
Seizure is all. It happens sometimes. Luckily you were here. Never know how bad it could have been. Might have even bit my own tongue off.
This was the first sign of danger. For the first time ever, I actually wanted to talk to him. Something about him didn't seem as painfully stupid. To explain this, before he just had a voice that made your brain hurt. Like pure stupidity, and far too many cigarettes tied together. All to create a voice that just made you want to punch him in the face.
I'm gonna go find somewhere to wash off. You might want to take it easy over there. You look like you're about to pass out. See ya.
Before I could even process what had fully happened, he was gone. Just like that, I was left alone in the woods, with a stick in my hand like some kind of asshole. So I just stumbled back to my cabin, to try and ignore the weird as fuck meeting I'd had with Steven. See, here's when I knew something was really off. When I got back, and the activities had resumed, Steven was actually paying attention. Talking to people, socializing, and answering questions out loud. It sounds fucking crazy, but this guy till now was just as much a slacker as I was, and half as smart. Suddenly he freaks the hell out and is now an example student? It was insane. Maybe I'd gone crazy. It could have been some sort of cult shit going on. The campsite could have been on top of some burial grounds or something. I kept going over every possible thing it could have been, before suddenly, it was lunch and Steven was sitting across from me.
You don't really care about any of this, do you? I mean, you've been staring at me since we got back. Not gonna lie, it's a little crazy is all.
Sorry, people don't normally flip their shit in front of me. It's kind of hard to forget.
Well, yeah, I'd hope so. Would have to question your life choices if that was normal.
The conversation was leading nowhere fast, so I made a quick attempt to ignore him. Tactically, I took out my Oreos, and within milliseconds of opening the package, he'd stole one. No asking for permission or anything, he just stole it. And with one swift motion, he popped the entire cookie into his mouth. Steven just continued with some mundane chit-chat, and the most frightening thing happened. He was interesting. I don't even remember what he was saying, but I couldn't stop listening. I mean, his monstrous cookie-eating habits aside, he'd gone from being as charismatic as a paper bag to the fucking source of the party. It was all so entertaining. It almost made me ignore the bulge in his cheek that looked like it was crawling around in his flesh as he ate, wiggling slowly along his jawline before it seemed to split and dig itself back into the meat of Steven's face. So here's the real problem. He might be a horrible monster. Actually, I'm almost completely certain he is. When you look at him in the right light, you can see the outlines of something moving underneath his skin. The thing is, he's still undoubtedly a more tolerable person than the real Steven was. So my question here is, am I a bad person for liking my possible alien overlord more than his real human counterpart?